Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Inside Lowell Daily Pulse, the Thursday, June 26th edition of the Daily Pulse. I'm your host, Teddy Panos, coming here from the WellPoint Studios here in beautiful, historic downtown Lowell, a much cooler downtown Lowell, and today a much more heavily populated downtown Lowell as that annual convention of future physicians and medical leaders, whatever they call themselves, is in town having their convention at the Songa Center in Lowell. So you're going to notice a lot of increased activity, foot traffic, and yes, vehicular traffic as well in the downtown. But it's great to have thousands of people here in the Mill City and making our downtown a vibrant place once again. Got a big show for you today. I kind of teased it yesterday as the decision part 2. You remember LeBron James back in 2010, I think it was, when he made his decision, a big ESPN special. He was deciding whether to stay with the Cleveland Cavaliers or go someplace else. And he made his announcement that he was taking his talents to Miami Beach and the Miami Heat. Well, today, our version here in Lowell of the decision involves politics, a different kind of sport, but a pretty important decision for those who care nonetheless. We're joined here in the WellPoint Studios by Lowell School Committee member, longtime Lowell School Committee member, Jackie Doherty. Good morning, Jackie. How are you? Good to have you here.
Good morning, Teddy. Happy to be here.
Even though you got caught in that traffic that I was just talking about.
Yes.
I was coming back from a doctor's appointment with my dad last night, and I decided, I'll just take the connector in instead of coming down the South Highlands and coming down Broadway Street. And boy, did I regret it, getting stuck in that traffic.
Merrimack Street going both ways, pretty jammed.
Yeah, they have I think they do their morning session starts at 10, so usually between 8 and 10, there's a ton of traffic. Then they kind of break for lunch at 3, and then dinner, they go back again at 6. So it gets a little bit crazy, especially with so many of the attendees, their families, parents, yet whatnot, staying at hotels out of town, besides the one at the Sonesta in Lowell. So it gets a little crazy. But I appreciate you fighting the traffic and joining us here. And I appreciate you going to be announcing your decision that everybody's waiting on. Will you seek re-election to the Lowell School Committee? I'm gonna pause you for one quick second. One more little tease. This is the cliffhanger. This is where we get in our commercials. I want to thank my Daily Pulse sponsors before we get to our discussion with Jackie. Of course, Ray Booten, licensed realtor in Massachusetts and New Hampshire, certified appraiser in both states as well. So if you're looking to buy or sell a home, a business, or a commercial property, or if you'd like said property appraised, Ray Booten is your man. You can find him easily enough online, realestaterayBooten.com. That's realestaterayBooten.com. Thanks as well to our friends at WellPoint. WellPoint is the only health plan offering healthcare benefits exclusively to Massachusetts GIC members at WellPoint. Your whole health is their whole point. Thank you to Ray. Thanks to WellPoint. We got a bunch of other sponsors we're going to thank, but enough people have been hanging on pins and needles over this decision, Jackie. They're asking me, do you know what Jackie's going to do? Has she said anything? I've reached out to you. I've probably blown up your phone a million times between January and now. You've made a decision.
Yes, and I have to say it's been difficult. This work has been very important to me. It's been a privilege to serve this community, but I've decided not to run for re-election. And I'm looking back over 18 years and saying, wow, so much has happened, but yes.
Yeah. All right. You're emotional. It seems like even now, just talking about it,
Definitely.
that it's kind of an emotional decision. When did you come to this decision officially, and what went into it? What went into finally walking away from the public sector, as they call it, and serving after almost 2 decades.
Right. So, and there was a gap in between that too. So, yep. I mean, I guess I'd like to go back to how did I start in this role? Because I never saw myself as somebody who was into politics. Mm-hmm. And I think that in many ways, I'm not your ideal politician. I hate the fundraising part. I don't like asking people for money. I'm not known for being tactful or subtle. I'm very direct in my concerns. But I started out on the citywide parent council, 5 years of that. And it was in 2003 when John Cox was city manager, and the schools had a budget that the council was not looking to support. And at that time, I think they had about 100 positions that were cut. That was the beginning of me, like, got to do more than just be a voice on the parent council. And I decided to run then. What's happened is, fast forward through, like you said, almost 2 decades. I don't think from the beginning my husband was really into me being on the committee.
There's only room for one politician in a family, and he's become a staple at city council meetings and whatnot, advocating especially for environmental issues and building architectural issues, etc.
Yeah, we're the 2 E's. I'm education, he's environment. But I think that once I got into it, and even now, the sense of there's still so much work to do. And I did make a commitment to myself. I'd like to I'm chair of the policy subcommittee. We're reviewing policies that are like 25 plus years old. It's a 900-page document. I want to finish that work. It's just never seemed like a good time to step away. But there's been a lot of factors in my personal life that, we all went through COVID, right? But during that period in 2020, we sold our house that I'd raised my kids in. So I've been in Lowell 32 years. And we bought a multi-unit on the river, which is beautiful. I'm in an apartment. But the plan was always to tear down this old little shack we had in New Hampshire, and Jay was going to design me a house. Mm-hmm. So that took many, many years. We went through the whole pandemic and all that, but the house is ready now. And, so we're transitioning out of Lowell, and that, with my work in Waltham kept me very centered here. I work for an organization that's based out of Waltham, Mass. I'm looking to go more hybrid on that role. So it seemed like I couldn't commit to another 2 years, and I don't want to do the work without being fully committed to it.
All right. You mentioned the home in New Hampshire. So there's been some speakers during the budget process, and others on social media have been alluding to the fact that there are people representing us who don't even live here. And and I was, I'm thinking, well, I wonder if they're talking about Jackie, because I know about you built a beautiful. Your husband's an architect,
right?
So when you said he built you a house, he built you.
And he really did.
Quite the house.
And he didn't really want to go there either. It was like my dream since I was 9.
Right. And you're living up close to the coast. And I'm quite frankly, I was surprised you didn't come to this decision sooner. But as you said, there's work to do. But just can we put this to bed for the folks who've said this? And, I'd like to think we've learned something from the Dominic Lay situation. Yeah. And what we discovered was you can have as many residences as you want, basically where you kind of register to vote, where you serve if in elected office, and where you consider your home is where you can vote and where you can serve. Right. You've never left Lowell.
Right. My car is registered in Lowell. I have an apartment.
That's something your colleague didn't even do.
And as I said, if you look at my employment, all my information, my credit card, everything is my address in Lowell. But I am going to be transitioning away from that because as Jay, he has his own business too. And he's currently has 2 offices, one in Lowell and one in New Hampshire. He just bought a new computer system. He had it set up in New Hampshire. As he's transitioning more to be in New Hampshire, I'm really at the apartment by myself, which is fine after decades of marriage to have a couple of nights away from
that time.
Well, the change from being on Tyler Park, that beautiful home that we renovated, and that was boarded up when we bought that in 1993. It took us pretty much the 30 years of living there to renovate it. We went from this big old Victorian to this small apartment on the river, and also a Victorian, beautiful old building. But that cramped space, you do kind of, it's nice to have your own space,
So when in the process did you kind of say to yourself, all right, that's it, I'm not going to run? And you had hinted to me a couple of months ago that you'd pretty much made a decision, but you wanted to wait till the end of the budget process and make sure of your decision and then make the announcement. And
I didn't even get to the end because the time was going by so, like the I thought we had the final meeting with the city council on the budget was going to be June 24th, Tuesday. And that was my plan, you know, try to hold the city accountable one more time, which has kind of been my, you know, my badge of honor. And even before I get on this role, but then when I found out they weren't discussing the budget, the packet came out Friday night on the internet, nothing about the budget on, then it's not going to be till July 8th. And I'm like, I can't wait that long. And I know people have pulled papers and good people are running. And so there's that sense like I can step back. I can't, the work is never going to be finished. Right. But so I just, that's when I thought I'm going to just reach back out to you. I also need to reach back out to John McDonough. He's been texting me about what are you going to do? What are you going to do? And to me, you don't run for this office and not complete it. You know what I mean? I've got to finish this term. That's what I was elected to do. But after that, I couldn't commit to it. So it really was about, let's get through the budget. And in the end, I even made the decision to go public with it before that.
Okay. As you look back, 18 years, 9 terms that you served, you mentioned there was a break in between, was it 4 years in between? Yep. Okay. Before asking you kind of to look at the schools today versus what it was when you first started, you as a school committee member, do you feel you've made a difference? Do you feel that as you look back, are there things that you kind of say, you know what, I had a hand in that. Things that we can all, politics, you can always find reasons to battle, but there are things that we all agree as Lowellians or people who love this town and have dealt with it, that they're all good. Is there something you look back on and you say, yeah, I've made a difference?
I definitely feel that I've made a difference, but I wish I had done more. I wish I had done better. I think people who know me or have watched me know I do my homework. I speak out. I've tried always. And I would say this advice to anybody who wants to get into politics from the passion side of it, not like as a career opportunity, but because they care about what they're fighting for. You've got to be true to what you think is the right thing to do. And sometimes that upsets people. I mean, I have upset a lot of people. Yep. And I remember someone saying to me, oh, you're going to get into politics in Lowell? Like, we have a reputation as a city that, it's what's the say? They don't stab you in the back; they stab you right in the eye. It's a tough field anyway, and so you really got to. And I think for me, I did go through that kind of getting beat up and taking it personal. I think that's why social media has had such an impact, especially on our young people. That people can be the vitriol that you get these really hurtful things in a very public way. And how do you learn to step back from that, have a thick skin? The only thing that's kept me able to do that is knowing that in the end I did what I thought was right. And for me, it was right for the kids, the parents, the staff, in that order. What's right for the students first. So I forget your question.
You did answer. You feel like you have made a difference, even though along the way you piss some people off, and that's a good thing. It means you've had to decide important things. I do have to ask about a couple of those decisions. The one, as you talk about having a 4-year break in between, a lot of folks attribute that to the fact that you drew the ire of the teachers union, and they made you pay at the ballot box, and you got back on. But
I'll tell you something. That is, if you ask me, you look back at 18 years. Any regrets, right? I don't know if you were thinking to ask me that.
100%.
I was thinking about that, and I said, I thought to myself, I regret the way I spoke out to that reporter that day, where I shared information from executive session during the labor negotiations. And just to put it in context, I was sitting in traffic on 495 for hours, it was 2 hours. At that time, I was working in Grafton, trying to get back to Lowell. And this was in 2011, which was the year my son graduated. I mean, that's why it's so succinct in my mind, right before the election. And I went into a rant about Paul George's and the teachers union.
Join the club.
And it wasn't specific to the teachers, because I know many teachers in the Lowell schools. They taught my kids. And I come from a family of educators. But this sense of, and often our goals align. What the teachers want and what we want, what I want, I'm going to speak for myself, on the school committee are the same. The supports to be able to educate our kids well. But when you're sitting at that table, it's money, it's money, it's money, and things that let's, have a longer lunch, or let's, more time for professional development. Well, you got to pay for it, you got to pay. And we never have the money, right? So I ranted about something, I let information out. It just blew up the whole world. And I regret that. And I said, I admitted it. I don't know if you remember, I had a letter
very well.
And I remember Jim Campanini, and he was not somebody, I remember Dick Jr. saying to me, Jackie, you get into fights with a guy who buys ink by the barrel.
That's right.
And, he gives me a 300, 400 word, article. So when I called him, I said, I have an editorial. I want to send you a letter to the editor. Immediately calls me. He said, are you sure you want to send this? Because I was saying, I'm the one. I'm the one who said it. And I had to take ownership for that. And I think, so that's a regret. But the fighting or the pushing, trying to hold, I don't want to say fighting, but it is that. It's be accountable. And it's been most of the work, if you followed me, has been holding the school department, administrators accountable for doing their job with competency and integrity, and then holding the city council accountable for supporting your schools and supporting our buildings.
It is the regret, which you've clearly stated again today, and I do remember your letter to the editor of the Sun, is the regret that you violated executive session,
yes,
or that you took on the teachers union? Because kind of the popular thing is to say, well, she learned her lesson and she got back on, and boy, did those negotiations go well for the teachers beyond that. Not that you're the only vote, you were just one of 7, but
right. The regret is that I violated executive session, and I remember trying to explain it, like, well, they're not telling the truth, and having somebody say back to me, that's like, I hate you, you hit me first, so I hit you back. It's really not an acceptable excuse. So yes, that's the regret, not the push, not the fallout even, because I'm going to throw another name at you, Bill Topia. He always said to me, if you don't get reelected, you get to stay home on Wednesday nights. Like, it can't be about that. Like, was I happy not to get reelected? No, I took it hard. I felt really bad. And I said, I'm done with this job. And it was 4 years later that people started reaching out to me. And a lot of things had started to unravel in the time I was away, especially the role of the citywide parent council. It never really came back the way it was before that.
Do you feel you paid the price on election night because you violated executive session, which technically is, that's a big no-no? Or do you think you paid the price because you spoke out against the union?
I guess it was, I felt like there was a target on me. It wasn't just because of the executive session. I was also not enamored with the superintendent at the time. And we were in the process of looking at renewing a contract, and I was against doing that. A very popular superintendent. So sometimes if a superintendent is really popular with the union, it's not always necessarily that great for the students in the classroom, because part of the role of the administration is to hold the staff accountable for doing the work with competency and integrity. And so, I don't want to speak badly about anyone, but I do think it was a combination of those two things. That, yes, the union targeted me, but it was also weren't working to keep a popular superintendent, popular with the union.
Yeah. And one thing I'll say, you have never been afraid to be unpopular. That was, you're talking, of course, about Dr. Chris Augusta Scott and that.
You remember that?
The ultimate, also, I had started doing my radio stuff by then, so I remember it very well. You also made a very important decision that you were on the losing side of that issue as well, but that was the hiring of a superintendent at a time when Jay Lang
I wasn't on the committee.
Oh, you were not on the committee.
That's some of the things that fell apart.
Okay, my mistake.
I was not.
I thought you were one of the votes for Jay Lang, and I'm curious if you look back on that and say, boy, would it have been nice if we got that one in. So, no disrespect to Liam Skinner, but there's been so much turmoil. Right. In that superintendent's office since then.
He wasn't involved then.
But there's so much turmoil since then. We've been through what, 3 of them now? And Jay Lang has had a nice time in Chelmsford, and everybody loves him out there. Know.
So when I got those calls a couple of years later, you've got to run. Have you been paying attention to what's been happening? And I'm like, yes, I live here still. But my kids were out of the system by then, you know. And I decided to go back in because I didn't want to end on the note I had ended on. I wanted it, and I think I learned some things too, right? Mm-hmm. And I've always said that to my kids. You know, you make a mistake, you learn from it. That's life, right? As long as you're not hurting somebody, you can let it go. So when I got back on, I mean, then we had several superintendents that were, frankly, very disappointing. And my work in terms of trying to hold that administration accountable, I think, was significant, had a significant impact on our ability to move forward with the kind of leadership that we need.
All right. One more important vote I want to ask you about. Lowell High School.
Oh, yes.
The decision about where to put it. 8 years later, obviously, we're not going back. We got to fix that school, get it done, whatever. But as you see how things have played out now, had you had this same information in 2017, would you have voted the same way as you did?
Absolutely. And I know this is one of the things that we got into. Do you remember my birthday? I came on the radio the day of my birthday because the night before, a lot of stuff was going on. You were very much against keeping it downtown.
I was and
there was a whole group of Káli supporters, and I felt like somebody had to say the other side, and it just happened to be the day of my birthday.
You chose to celebrate your birthday getting bashed on the radio with me?
Yeah, celebrate. And it was another one of those times where, I mean, you were very cordial to me face-to-face in the radio, and then I drive away, and of course I'm listening, and Káli supporters are calling in, and it was all kinds of trashing going on. And I'm driving to meet my sister for lunch, and I'm like, this is not the way I want to. So with the high school, a couple of things. I stand firmly by my belief that the high school needed to stay central to the city. We needed it downtown. For my reasons, we're focused on the students, the many students who are able to walk to the high school, the location of the high school being so close to Middlesex Community College, UMass Lowell, all that has stayed the same and has been the reason I supported it. And we have grown that early college program incredible. Right? It's just really taken off. More and more students starting college with half a year's credits already under their belt, that sort of thing. My husband's position on it was more the economic impact of having this hole in the middle of the downtown, and that those things, the benefit of having all these young people and all that activity, although the local businesses, I'm sure the traffic situation, I know myself, I would try not to be downtown at 2:30. There have been things that have been disappointing. And I think part of it was the pandemic. Let's not, brush off the impact that had on construction, whether new construction or renovation work. There have also been things that shouldn't have happened. There wasn't enough information about, and I mean, Jay would say, and we've had this conversation, they could have done more to know more about what was under those buildings. And even... So we have the school building committee. I'm not on it. My husband is. And, and I don't want to speak for him, but that feeling like you've got this committee that maybe the architects and the project managers are not listening to their concerns, are not giving them the weight they should. Things have not gone as smoothly as they'd like. That happens. But here's the thing that I thought was interesting that Jay said to me. You can expect 5% over budget. That's reasonable. We're looking at 10% over budget. That's not acceptable. So, yeah, it hasn't gone great. There's been other factors. But the location piece, I still feel very strongly
Even
about.
If you had known in 2017 that the cost would be $420 million and you'd have time delays, you would have made the same decision?
Right. I think if we knew more, we could have done better. with the renovation piece.
All right. We're chatting with Jackie Doherty, Lowell School Committee member. Everybody's been waiting in the political bubble here in the city of Lowell to hear her decision about whether she's going to seek re-election. We appreciate Committee member Doherty telling us today, for the first time publicly, that she will not be seeking re-election. We'll continue our discussion, and now that she doesn't have to worry about winning votes, we'll talk about education and the Lowell schools and see if what she's been telling us for 18 years is what she really thinks, or has she been holding back? We'll get to that discussion in a quick second. First, let me just thank my Daily Pulse sponsors. Thank you to Ray Booten, licensed realtor in Mass and New Hampshire, certified appraiser in both states as well. Find him online, realestaterayBooten.com. Thank you to WellPoint. At WellPoint, your whole health is their whole point. Washington Savings Bank, banking that feels like home. Make the switch now to Washington Savings Bank. TMI Properties, quality and value at every price point. Find your perfect space with TMI. Mahoney Oil, providing warmth and protection to Greater Lowell and Southern New Hampshire since 1925. The Greater Lowell Community Foundation, improving the quality of life in our communities through strategic, impactful philanthropy. Francis E. Preventure Insurance, the agency Lowell has counted on and Greater Lowell has counted on to protect its most valuable assets since 1982. And by the Massachusetts Pirates, bringing all the hard-hitting action and excitement of arena football to the Mill City. Pirates yesterday signed the very accomplished quarterback brother of an NFL quarterback. They got a Tagovailoa on their team. Not Tua, he's still with the Dolphins, but Taulia Tagovailoa. It's going to be in uniform for the Pirates this week. All right, back to school committee member Jackie Doherty. I joked with you in the text as we were setting up today's interview that now you won't have to hold back. You said to me, when have you ever known me to hold back? So have you held back? Are we about to hear some discussion now that we may not have heard if you were running for re-election?
No. I have always tried to speak my truth. Use appropriate language, be respectful, professional. That's how I work. That's how I I couldn't seem, and I get upset. I get emotional. I'm like that. I don't know if it's the Sicilian in me, but I do believe in treating people with respect. You can communicate, you can be direct, and you don't have to be rude or use bad language. So I
told you can swear if you want because we're on the internet, and you said nope, you won't. Your mother wouldn't allow it. Yeah. So, is the current Lowell public school situation, is it sustainable? Is the programming, the funding mechanism, and how you need to get the funding to do it all? Is it working? Can it continue to work given some of the realities that are coming from Washington, D.C. and potentially from the state?
Yeah, it has to work. What option do we have if we don't give our children a good education? And I'm not talking about the kids in Wellesley. It's so important in gateway cities like Lowell that our public schools provide a high quality education. And I was thinking about it. I always say it's important to the city. It's our future leaders, right? It's more than that. Because we are a gateway city, because we have all the newcomers and the ones who are struggling financially, and just if we don't provide an education, the whole country is not going. It's like our whole premise of democracy is involvement of citizens. And that means you have to be paying attention and engaged in order to make good voting decisions. And so if we don't have students who are getting the resources they need to be contributing members of our society, what do we have? What are we left with? I think there's problems with the system. And I want to kind of overlap with what's happening here in the city and nationally. So a lot of people are upset with there's too much government spending, too much inefficiency. I can tell you firsthand, I've seen it. That's been one of my struggles on the school committee. Use the resources wisely, make smart decisions, don't give inflated salaries to people that don't have the qualifications. I've been trying to do that, right? And we know it's happening throughout the government at all levels, right? But the solution is not to just go in and randomly, okay, we're going to cut, millions and millions of dollars, and we're going to cut the last, 400 people who we hired. It's got to be done with thought, with precision, and we look at our budget, we look at our staffing ratios. Yeah, we've got more assistant principals in the schools than we used to have. You know why? Because student behavior has been more challenging. Student mental health, the mental health of our staff. Everyone, I think, I felt traumatized by the pandemic. I don't know how you took it. I lost people, and I worried about losing people. I'm 6 of 7. I'm one of the younger. I have all these older siblings that my sister was in intensive care for 3 weeks. We thought we were going to lose her. It was a very scary time. And I think we're still coming back from that. So we hired more social workers. Mm-hmm. We hired, which we probably should have had a long time ago, a director of the whole mental health program. Maybe we did at some point and we lost it because, we go through these periods where we have to make cuts in staff. And the first thought is, well, we don't have this position filled. Let's cut that one instead of laying somebody off, and then trying to recover from that. And the sustainable part. So if the city, right now we're in a good place because we're in Massachusetts, right? And we are the leading state in terms of trying to have good public schools. They're funding almost 80% of our budget. They have been for a while. I'd say since ed reform in 1993. Sorry.
Happens to me all the time.
How do I do that to just go up? And the city is required to provide what the state determines your minimal commitment. And they continue to give us less and less cash out of that minimal commitment and put it on the maintenance of effort piece. So the commitment is cash, maintenance of effort. Maintenance of effort is thing like there's the plowing of our parking lots, the maintenance of our buildings, which we know they haven't really been keeping up on that. They've been doing a much better job in the last few years than they had before. But constantly adding more to the maintenance of effort piece. Like last year they gave us $14 million. This year they told us we're going to give you 10. And we had, this pushback, and I think they upped another $2 million. We haven't finalized that.
Right, that still needs
which is killing me because I'm going to go before them. And now I've told you and I've told the world I'm not running for re-election, but I'm not done yet. I still have my voice. And I think that was the other thing. You're only one voice and one vote. Mm-hmm. But it's still the opportunity to have impact is there. And I try to use that opportunity.
All right, let's talk about that budget because this is one of my pet peeves. And I don't know if you caught my last interview with Superintendent Skinner, but there was a pretty spirited back and forth on it. I think the school budget has a structural problem, and whether you get $4 million or $2 million this year, they're gonna be back next year in probably even worse shape. So brings us back to the teacher discussion. So we can talk about maintenance of effort, we can talk about cash, and we can talk about what the state contributes. You said the state contributes most of it. The state upped its contribution to the Lowell Public Schools by $18 million. So even if the city cuts $4 million, the schools had $14 million more to work with. That's 5.6%, if I remember my math from that interview, an increase in the budget. You don't have a 5.6% increase in your home budget. If you do, you're lucky. Most of the kids going to school in Lowell, most of the parents paying taxes in Lowell didn't see that increase. How can the school department get its budget in a situation where it can't sustain itself on a 5.6% increase in the overall budget, wherever the money comes from? And it required a 7.5% increase, because if the city gave you the 4, you would have a 7.5% increase in available funding over the year before. And you'd have schools that are being worked on finally. I know the maintenance of effort stuff gets fuzzy, but it was been a complaint for decades that the schools aren't being maintained and whatnot. And there's
the firehouses too.
Right, and there's at least an effort to do that. But how can the school department not sustain itself on a 5.6% increase?
Well, I don't have the answer to that. I just look at where did the increase come from? right? Did the state just say, we're going to give you this 18 million for the heck of it? No, it's based on the needs of our students, right? Okay. And so they look at things like poverty level, they look at things like English language learners, special education. So to say like it's not sustainable because it's kind of a false narrative, because if the funding is based on the needs of the student, you have to keep following the needs of the student, right?
Correct. So let me take you to where I believe the issue began and why that $4 million became an issue. Most recent round of union negotiations with all city employees, they got a 9% increase over 3 years. 4% year one, 3% year two, 2% in year three, total of 9% increase. Last school department negotiations, 11% increase. 4%, 4%, and 3%. So 2% more money for school workers' contracts than for city workers' contracts. Now, I did some quick math in my head, and I may be off by $1 or $2, but I don't think I'm that far off. If your school budget is $271 million combined from the state and the city, and 75 to 80% of your costs are payroll related, which they are, you start to do the math, 271 times 0.8. I did pay attention to math class. And now you multiply I can't remember that number offhand. It was like 230 million or something like that. You multiply that number by 0.2% and you get $4 million some odd dollars, give or take a few bucks. Interesting, it's the number between what the city cut back on cash and from the year before to this year. I'm not so sure that's a coincidence. Nobody has said it to me, but I'm not so sure if that was a message to the school department, like, hey, we're trying, but you keep giving in to the teachers' unions, which you express frustration going back 14 years about the same type of thing. So is there a point? Is my reasoning, and those who would agree with me, is there some validity of that the schools created this issue because they refused to hold the line in the most recent collective bargaining agreement?
So I gotta start with, I did not vote for that contract.
Okay.
I was a no publicly on that.
Is it because you knew what was going to happen?
No, but I did not make the connection between the $4 million until you just said that. But I think that's absolutely what happened in 2003 when John Cox was city manager, that the school department and the committee at the time had voted a raise that the city did not think was appropriate. And that resulted in 100 positions cut from the schools and me running for office. So it's funny how not that much has changed with that. And I'm sure I didn't see the interview with Superintendent Skinner. I wish that I had, because I think it would have informed our discussion today.
You'll have to go back and watch.
But I'm guessing that some of the arguments, because I heard them at the table, was, there's a shortage of these positions, which we are seeing. I mean, on a personal level, really strong educators leaving the field, right? And certain positions very difficult to fill, right? That was an argument, but in terms of, is this the way to go, to just keep throwing money that we don't have? No, okay. I've never been a supporter of that. So I can't really rebut your position, but that doesn't mean that I would accept the city continuing to lower their cash contribution, because it is only from their cash contribution that we pay salaries. And it's only from that.
And you were very vocal even at the last, so there was a facilities subcommittee meeting, joint facility subcommittee meeting last week, that somebody said to me, are you watching this meeting? And I was, and they said, you have to watch it. So I went back and watched it, and there was some tense back and forth. You passionately said, you're not giving us $2 million to one of the councils. You took 4 and you're kind enough to give half of it. Right. Yes, that's the word you said. You're restoring $2 million. Right. You're not giving us, $2 million or the $4 million that you say.
And I really think, and some of the councils are very supportive of the schools. I recognize that. And I don't want to seem like I'm ungrateful, but I have to say, if you're concerned about positions or, salaries, run for school committee. That's the role. The role of city council is not that. And I think we are trying, and again, I'm one vote, one voice. We're trying to pull ourselves back up. We've had a number of several poor leaders, which make a big difference. The person at the top sets the tone that goes for the whole organization. So we've had a number of leaders that we struggled and we lost ground with. We had the pandemic. I honestly feel like we are just coming back from those losses, and we're not there yet. But I do feel, and we haven't done his evaluation yet. I do feel that Superintendent Skinner is trying. He understands the city. I think we share similar goals about really putting the students first, but we don't agree on everything either.
Is the administration top heavy? Let me preface that by saying there are stats, national stats, that show over the last 50 years, the percentage of administrators hired dwarfs the percentage increase in actual classroom teachers, paras, etc. hired. It is the Lowell Public Schools dealing with the same situation? Is it top heavy? And I know you mentioned the need for assistant principals because of issues that didn't exist when I was going to school and you were going to school. But do you believe it's a little bit top heavy?
Yes, I think that we did a reorganization that I wasn't completely satisfied with. And again, I'm just one vote. We have more assistant superintendents than we've ever had. We've when the previous administration came in, they blew it up. So these are other areas that I have regrets about. But again, I was one voice, one vote. I don't think I could have swayed the tide. I didn't push it as much as maybe I should have. There's been so much divisiveness and dysfunction on the committee in recent years. It's been difficult, challenging.
All right. We mentioned that the facility subcommittee meeting. As I look at it, my thought is, because basically the answer was from the school department, no, we're not changing the facility situation as is.
We need more information.
From the committee as a whole, correct. Once the budget is settled and you get your $2 million, and that hopefully that means nobody's going to get laid off and we can fill all the para openings that existed before the budget situation. Right. Will it be much easier cause you'll probably have, maybe you won't be part of that decision since you're not running, but do you believe that suddenly the school department and school committee will be more amenable to working with the city on creating some kind of joint facilities department once this little battle over the budget is settled? Was that a message you guys were firing back at the city and the city council?
From my perspective, and I don't remember who said it at that meeting, they talked about it's an issue of trust. It is an issue of trust, and it's a blame game. And so you had certain counselors, you said you watched the meeting, that were saying, well, you haven't maintained, this pointing at our maintenance, our janitors, right? Our custodians.
The finger squarely was pointed at the custodians.
They're not
doing
keeping the buildings clean. They're not maintaining. They're not doing the filter change. They're not. And I'm sitting here and I'm in the position there's a certain amount of that we could do a better job. I've been, again, with that, what's your focus? Be accountable. Do your job. I'm going to the school. I'm touring the school and I'm going to go in the bathrooms. It's 9 a.m. Why am I seeing visible dirt? It's 9 a.m. You think about it. You've got thousands of teenagers and young kids in these buildings. So there's a certain amount of, we'll take some ownership of that. We need to do a better job. But the other side of that is you're trying to get a toilet fixed. And it takes months and months and months and multiple visits. Let's come on. Oh, we're going to need this part, that part. All right, well, it's 2:00. We'll be back another day. Come on. There's blame both ways that we need to hold each other accountable. And that's the school department trickle down, hold people accountable to do their job. So that part, I think, is going to take some time. For me, I need things in writing that we've been talking about this for years, one of the counselors said. And I'm like, not with any details. I want some evidence that we're going to be a priority. You might remember I mentioned what happened when they didn't have heat at the Bartlett School. I wake up to texts from teachers. It's in I could show you the picture of the temperature, 52 degrees or 53 degrees, whatever it was. I immediately call the superintendent, call our, because I'm staying with the school side, call Rick Underwood. He's our, manager of the maintenance services for the schools. And they sent one boy home that he was medically complex. His temperature got so low. Nobody even showed up for more than 4 hours. We're not a priority now. How is this going to ensure that we will be a priority? That our buildings will be, if we have a toilet broken or a faucet that's leaking in a bathroom at some school, that somebody is going to get to it in a reasonable amount of time. And that takes an investment from the city on hiring plumbers, electricians, all those positions that they don't have enough of. And where are they going to get the money to do that? From some savings by combining our departments? Okay, great. I want that efficiency. I want the work done. But how, when the money starts to get tight again, how are we going to be protected to know that we're still going to be a priority?
The city likes to pat itself on the back. We hear it over and over again. We've heard it from the Golden administration, heard it from the Donahue administration, heard it from the Murphy administration. Oh, we're putting more into the schools and the buildings, the facilities than ever before. They talk about exceeding net spending, and it's almost always because of the schoolwork repair. And I remember there was a famous walkthrough when Bernie Lynch was manager at the time, and there was a punch list of hundreds of items that had been sitting on that list of the to-do list for ages and hadn't still gotten to, and it kind of became a big thing. So the administrations since that time, and I think probably even the Lynch administration, have said, well, we're doing more now, we're doing more now. Are they doing as much as they're saying? Is it better now than it was in 2003 when you first popped on the scene?
Absolutely. I would say it is definitely better. And of all the things, we keep going back to the pandemic 5 years ago, we have seen the collaboration. We are trying to work better together, and I think we have seen it. It's not enough. It's not enough. And if you look at, I had asked Superintendent Skinner to give us a list of millions of dollars that we spent on things that Paul Georges would get up and say, this is not your responsibility. I'm just at the top of my head, you even think of, we could say the St. Jacques School. We spent $2.4 million to buy the school. We are tenants in these properties. The city owns them, and other kinds of maintenance things, which I've had the list in front of me, I could tell you, that really shouldn't be our responsibility. They're the landlord's responsibility, because we had that ESSER money, and I'm like, I just want them to have shades. So when the sun's pouring in, I want windows that open, because we got to worry about fresh air for so we were doing things that really we shouldn't have been spending money on, because we wanted it done. And it's not like, I guess I'm pointing that out to say, I think that the collaboration intention is there on both sides, but to just say, okay, here's something we want from you. Give up your control over who cleans your buildings and all that, and we'll give you what? What are we getting for that? I want it in writing.
Better buildings is what they'll tell you, right?
Right, but I want assurances that you're not going to go without heat. We are the city, and this was under City Manager Murphy, because I remember going before the council and saying to him, we had to shut the high school down. We could not have kids in school because we have old system. Well, now that's not going to be true of the high school, but for many of our schools, we don't have backup systems. There's been, and I realize we all work with budgets, right? And if you don't have a lot of money, you're trying to spread it thin, you might not do, we really should replace this heater. Well, it's still working. We'll just tweak it a little bit and,
we can get another year out of it.
But we've been doing that a long time. And one other thing about the state funding piece, they also look at the city. When they say, what do we think Lowell should pay to educate their children? It's based on the economics of our city. They look at, we're not a Wellesley. We don't have families, making six figures, and well educated. You know, we do, but I mean, in the majority of families, how many renters do we have as opposed to a Weston or a Wellesley? So that's all factored in terms of what they think the city should be able to afford to educate their kids.
So I've kept you much longer than the 30 or so minutes we had discussed.
Oh my God, that went by fast.
It always does. And by the way, you're invited to come back more often. I'd love to have you be part of our election team, looking at the school committee races as well.
I never thought of that.
So if you're in the area, happy to have you. I want to look at big picture, because you did say you want to talk about what's happening in DC with the Department of Education. So there are folks who say this will be the end of education. They're just going to cut all this money out of funding. The folks who are saying, no, we're just going to take it out of the bureaucrats in DC and we're going to give it to the states and let them decide how to do it. Do you have faith in that decision after your 18 years of experience and seeing it firsthand? Do you believe there's the potential that if Washington, D.C. does what it says and brings all that money back to the states, it could be beneficial for communities like Lowell?
Well, I think that there are people who look at the Department of Education as being just a pain in the neck, you know, all these regulations and ridiculous rules and all this. But there are roles that are important to me that they do play. And funding is certainly one of them. Like, we look at our current budget, the year that we're just ending next week, and more than 10 million of that was directly from federal grants. Again, based on our population, our poverty level, English language learners, special ed, all those things. But there are other roles that the Department of Ed plays. They're the watchdog on the states. And although I think we're in a very progressive state in terms of a state that values the public schools, Massachusetts has not always been without some, need to get some oversight. We have been called out, and I say we meaning the state, by Department of Ed for not doing enough regarding our special education students. We have big gaps between our, minority diverse students and our poorer students and our wealthier students that we're supposed to be doing a better job at. So to lose that oversight, all right, so maybe we'll be okay in Massachusetts, but what does it mean for Mississippi? I don't mean to target certain states, but states that typically are on the lower end, and they hold that. The other thing that Massachusetts started that the Department of Ed is responsible for is that whole, what does it mean to have a high school diploma in the United States? We were one of the first ones to come up with standards, the infamous MCAS.
The MCAS. The dearly
That's now gone. But there was a baseline. Like, you've got to be able to read, you've got to be able to do math. You talk about paying attention in math school. If you don't have somebody who's making sure that it's not going to go lower than this, again, we go back to how can we succeed as a democracy if we don't have educated, well-educated people? All right.
Final thoughts, as you have announced today that you will not seek re-election. What do you want to say to folks out there watching?
I just want to say I'm so grateful for this opportunity to serve the community in this way. It really has been work that has been meaningful to me, and I like to think that has made an impact, a positive impact in our schools and our children, because I care so much about it. So I appreciate that opportunity. Thank you.
All right. Jackie Doherty, Lowell School Committee member. Let me extend a personal thank you from me, and I'm sure I speak for all the folks who are out there. We've disagreed many times. You've probably cursed me many times, but you have never shied away from having a conversation with me, whether we disagree or agree. And I admire anybody who has put their name on a ballot. That alone is an incredible step and a sacrifice for you and your family and everyone who's done it. And then it gets even worse if you're lucky enough to win on election night, because then you have to serve, and it gets really challenging. But I want to thank you for your 18 years of service to the city. I have a hunch you won't completely go away, though. Your voice will still be heard from time to time, because once you're part of Lowell, it never leaves you.
No, and my kids are here permanently. My son's married now and bought a house.
You're going to have grandkids going into those schools, right?
Oh, I miss children in my life.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your time today, but more importantly, your 18 years.
Thank you.
All right. That's Jackie Doherty, Lowell School Committee member. Still gets to serve for another 6 months. And as you heard, she's going to keep fighting for those schools she's helped serve for the last 18 years. We appreciate her joining us today. We appreciate you joining us as well on the Daily Pulse. As we like to say here at Inside Lowell, if Lowell is your home, this is your place. Till next time, everybody, stay safe out there, and we'll catch you on the other side.